Hello, friends and enemies. I'm back. So I did make some progress while we were out adventuring in D&D. I was also adventuring in Genshin Impact, but I wasn't streaming because I didn't want to broadcast my friends' voices without their consent, since they aren't on my channel. My other group of friends and I meet together every Thursday night for D&D, and
Stories of your heroic deeds to save Mondstadt from destruction shall be known throughout the City of Freedom, well into the future. Please do visit me at our headquarters when you have the time. I also know a lovely tavern, if that's more your thing.
you're more my thing, but Nebula's even more my thing than you are, so.
Quite rewarding, no?
We've seized another temple from Stormterror's grasp.
I can take care of the rest here. You go take care of other things while I'm at it.
See you later then, bye-bye.
There's no way Hilly Turtles organized an ambush like this themselves. Not with their limited mental capacity. Thus you were behind this.
Knights of Favonius, always so inefficient.
Agree to disagree, but your involvement in this just made things a whole lot more interesting. Oh, I'm looking forward to this.
At the ready.
Oh, hello there. Give me a moment. I'm going to go ahead and jump into my Discord server real quick. Just realized I'd, not jumped in. It's been a day. Yeah? Alright. Okay.
Dodge this! Wind blade! Just realized I forgot to activate that other waypoint by the temple. Okay. Let's remember when I'm in that part of the map next. Yes?
This is it. One of the deserted temples of the Four Winds. These temples have been left to waste for years now. The people of Mondstadt almost never come here. There's a chance there's a monster nest or Hilitrol camp inside. Even Storm Terror has given up on its own temple. Yes. I also find it hard to accept, but Storm Terror was once one of the Four Winds. Huh? Wait! Did you just feel that? The wind here. Something's off. Let's go in and take a look. Be careful. can use that console to open the door.
Yeah, no, I figured that out in the other two dungeons.
Wow, I can see so far into the temple.
Okay. Use elemental sight to see the elemental attributes of different objects. Each element has its own different color. Green symbolizes Dendro. Okay. Dendro can be ignited with pyro skills, rendering them defenseless. Okay.
That's cheating. Oh no! A horn! The fighting must have got them riled up. Well, good thing I prepared my secret weapon, explosive puppet Buried Bunny. Go go Buried Bunny! Hey! Get him! Are those explosive barrels over there? Well, one shot should be able to blow them up. Not so hard! there's something up there. But how do we get across? Isn't this a pyro monument? If we hit it with a powerful pyro attack, we might trigger it. Dragon's breath! Is that where the power's coming from? Great, let's smash it.
Okay.
Phew, I'm tired. But at least this way we've helped Jean out. In the past, we were at least able to defend the city and keep it safe. This, of course, is mostly thanks to Jean. But now with Storm Terror directly attacking the city itself, the winds change. So too should our tactics.
Sounds deep.
It's what Lisa likes to say. Speaking of which, the four winds we were discussing earlier, if you want to learn more about our history, you can ask Lisa. I'm not saying I don't know our history. It's just, I mean, a librarian is supposed to be more knowledgeable than an outrider, right?
Huh. Okay. That is interesting.
It's finally done. Well, all that lay flow and elemental line stuff Lisa was going on about should hopefully be back to normal. Wanna go back and see how the knights are doing? But if you got anything more interesting to do, Paimon can come too. By the way, we obtained another Animalculus in one of the Four Winds temples, right? We might come across more of them in the future, so don't forget to offer them to the statues.
There are various ways to obtain adventure XP and raise your adventure rank, whether it be completing various quests, looking for chests, completing investigations in your adventure handbook, revitalizing leyline blossoms. You can obtain adventure XP from these activities and increase your adventure rank. More challenges and opportunities will also open up as your adventure rank increases. Put a pin in this one. Navigate. Pin. That one looks like the closest one I've unlocked, so yeah. Teleport now. And try to get that last fast travel station online. Wrong way.
you there.
Okay, so that's another temple. Alright.
Windblade! This moment will be frozen in time.
I missed a spot.
Double check to make sure there aren't any more waypoints available. Let's go ahead. Oh, there are two more within range here. Huh, okay, so I've expanded the range of where I can explore that way. Okay. Nope. Let's go ahead and go to this one. Trying to find an easy way to get onto the mountain path. Is that the lowest point that the mountains can offer? Ah, here. I think that might be a good entry point there, yeah? Yep. Partial cliff up.
Cool it! Freeze!
Hey! No one escapes my sights!
Challenge failed. Okay. Okay. Inventory real quick. Let's go ahead and heal up.
Hey! Go, Barret Bunny!
Okay. So I completed a couple challenges. Let's go ahead and check a look at my achievements, yeah? No drop. Alright. Looks like I've got almost all the fast travel stations capable of being unlocked at this time unlocked. Let's go ahead and aim for the next one. Might as well get my offering to the statue out of the way while I'm on it.
Windblade! Dodge this!
If you're wondering why I'm going after the waypoints right now instead of completing quests, you've not seen me play Dragon Age Inquisition, have you? My strategy is as follows. The faster you can move around the map, the easier your workflow with the quests will be. So you get all of the hard work of the base traveling out of the way, do a little bit of adventuring on the side, you get to level up and stuffs.
Okay, so a wind wall wasn't canceled out by more wind, so shrug. Okay. Okay.
That's cheap. Go, go, Bip! Leave it all to me. Time to clean up. Get him!
frostbite.
Okay. So, the next thing on the list is try to access this next statue. Or access this next statue. Yes, I'm trying to expand my teleportation network. No, I'm not being subtle about it. The less walking we have to do long term, the better.
This statue of the Seven seems to be affected by a monster nearby. Defeating that monster might remove this strange wind current seal thingy around the statue of the Seven.
Cool it.
Not so hard! Go, go, Baron Bunny! I missed a spot. Steady as stone.
So that's like a damage shield. Okay. Nice. Okay. Got it. I like it.
Dodge this!
Get him!
Cool it! Dodge this! Wind blade!
That's cheating!
Disappear!
Navigate to the next one. camera's facing towards it, but I'm not. Yes. Hello? Oh, it's one of the voices. Okay. One of the character voices. My bad. Sorry, for a moment there I thought someone might have joined the call. Sorry, I'm just a little lonely. I'll be fine. Oh, no, not wanting to send feedback yet. Whoop. Bloop, bloop. Bloop. Bloop, bloop. not the end.
Tired.
All members have fallen. Revive? Okay. Where do I revive is the question. Okay. Will be the last teleportation thing I activated? Yeah. So I need to remember, I need to aim further to the left. Yep, further to the left.
Get ready for the gliding champion of Mondstadt. I'll race you there. Bet you can't keep up with me.
Yeah, not getting involved. Is it above me? Please say it's above me. Yes, there.
to it.
Windblade!
Leave it all to me.
So I came all this way for nothing. Because there's nothing I can do to thaw that ice. Oh well. It's worth a shot. Next. Up. Navigate to this one. For teleporting. So the frozen south I cannot achieve anything at right now. I'm gonna go ahead and send my boyfriend a hug. Okay. Let's go ahead and try to navigate, yeah? Better than dying of sheer cold, yeah? the next one? No. This is the next one.
Cool it! Free! Don't push your luck! Ah!
I must leave no stone unturned.
Okay, there we go. That's another teleporter. Hang on. Let's look at that real quick. this entire continent over here is blocked off. Well, looks like that's as far as I'm gonna get to explore for now. Alright. I hope you don't mind. You're going to probably... I'm gonna actually hang up real quick. That way I can actually...
Something terrible happened here.
Well... Okay, so breathe in, breathe out.
Something terrible happened.
You're going to hear news in the background.
Good evening, Chris. Thank you, my friend. Much appreciated. And thanks you at home for joining us this hour. Leona
Hello.
Helmsley, remember her? She went
Who
to
just
prison.
yawned, 'cause it wasn't
She
me.
was a multi-billionaire, an actual multi-billionaire for real. She was president of Helmsley Hotels, which was a high-end luxury group of 2 or 3 dozen hotels, including the Park Lane in New York City and the Helmsley Palace. She herself appeared in ads for some of her hotels, bragging about how rich she was and how exacting she was and how she needed absolutely the best service and all the most luxurious stuff. And so she insisted on it at all of her hotels, and that's why you should come stay at her hotels. Sort of a familiar shtick at this point, I know, but it worked for Helmsley Hotels in the 1980s until it didn't. Turns out, despite being a billionaire, despite not only the image of immense wealth, but the actuality of it, Leona Helmsley and her husband had engaged in a number of chiseling tax cheats, including having a whole bunch of renovations done at a Helmsley vacation home in Greenwich, Connecticut. Leona Helmsley's private home. It was renovations on that home, including like putting in a dance floor and stuff. But she billed the renovations to the hotel company. She had the Helmsley Hotel Company pay to do those renovations on her private home. That had for her the double benefit of her not having to pay for those renovations herself, and also her hotel company got to deduct the payments as a business expense. Even though they weren't, it was just stuff she wanted personally. Ta-da! Yeah, she went to prison. The trial where she got convicted probably made her even more famous than her hotels had. This is a headline, July 12th, 1989, in the New York Times. Maid testifies, Helmsley denied paying taxes. Quote, Leona Helmsley once told a housekeeper at her Connecticut home that only the little people pay taxes. The housekeeper testified yesterday at Mrs. Helmsley's tax fraud and extortion trial. The witness, Elizabeth Baum, said the conversation took place at the Helmsley's home in Greenwich, 4 to 6 weeks after she was hired in September 1983. Ms. Baum said that she and Mrs. Helmsley were in a back hall of the $11 million home. I said, you must pay a lot of taxes, Ms. Baum testified. She said, we don't pay taxes. Only the little people pay taxes. Ms. Baum testified that staff salaries were paid by Helmsley businesses and that her paycheck was issued by the Harley Hotel chain, which was based in Cleveland. Ms. Baum also said she ordered groceries and household supplies for the Greenwich house from the Park Lane Hotel in New York City. The items were delivered in a hotel van, she said. Assistant U.S. Attorney Kathy Seibel asked Ms. Baum if she ever purchased food
hi, Sam.
locally in Greenwich.
I'm listening to Rachel.
She said she
Maddow
did
while
so
trying
only a
to
few times.
do
She
some
testified,
quests.
quote, "I bought something
feeling
for
too
the
bad.
house that we ate." She testified that when she asked Mrs. Helmsley to reimburse her for the cost of that food, Mrs. Helmsley said to her, quote, "You bought it. You pay for it." Real peach, right? Leona, only the little people pay taxes, Helmsley, went to prison for that scheme and more. That's that scheme in which she used her business as a tool for chiseling petty tax fraud, which is both a crazy thing for a super rich person to bother with, right? And it turns out it's exactly the kind of crime that super rich people think they can get away with and that they can get caught for, particularly if they are brazen about it. I mean, Leona Helmsley was having her business pay or provide for her personal living expenses, including the salaries for her maid and other servants at her private vacation home and the renovations there, even the food there. She had the business pay for all of it instead of her paying for it. That meant nothing comes out of her pocket and the business gets to deduct all of that for tax purposes. She was convicted on 33 counts. People sort of famously shouted at her and taunted her on the courthouse steps after her conviction. She went to prison in 1992. When she got out of prison, she had community service hours to perform. She apparently tried to get her employees to perform the community service for her. The court found out about it, and so then she got more hours. Leona Helmsley died in 2007. Nearly every headline on every obituary called the ex-convict the Queen of Mean when she died. Using a business to pay for your personal stuff as a way to avoid taxes, that's a tried and true way to go to prison. And being famous doesn't necessarily help you avoid that, being infamous or being famous. Do you remember on Seinfeld, there was a character called the Soup Nazi? Seinfeld was based on a real guy, a storefront soup place on West 55th Street in Manhattan, run by a guy who really would scream at you if you didn't order fast enough or if you didn't stand in exactly the right place. The CFO for the Soup Nazis soup company went to prison. Turns out for years, if God forbid you worked at the Soup Nazi place, you would get paid through all sorts of little chiseling off-the-book schemes designed to avoid taxes. And so the dude went to prison. Running your business in such a way that your business provides personal stuff to executives of the company and then writes it off like those are business expenses. Compensating the employees at your business in ways that are designed to hide that compensation from tax authorities. These are tried and true paths to prison. Even if you're not like a tax accountant, even if you're not somebody who studies these things, even if you're not a lawyer, even if you're somebody who just watches Seinfeld or read a single tabloid newspaper in the 80s, even for comically high-profile people, this is a tried and true way to end up in the Crowbar Hotel. Which is why, presumably, most people who try to commit those crimes know that they ought to be subtle about it. Mostly. Not all, though. And what New York prosecutors spelled out in court today was a variety of this kind of alleged crime that was, according to prosecutors, not at all subtle. The word we might use in not legal terms is brazen. The word the actual prosecutor used in court before the judge today was audacious. Prosecutor called it a sweeping and audacious illegal payment scheme. We just got in the transcript. You ready? The judge, good afternoon. Please be seated. The clerk, calling from the 59 calendar. I don't know what that is. Number one, the Trump Corporation, the Trump Payroll Corporation, and Alan Weisselberg. The judge, any reason why we cannot proceed with the arraignment? Defense lawyer, none. Prosecutor, none, Your Honor. The judge, arraign defendant. The clerk, Alan Weisselberg. The grand jury of the County of New York has filed an indictment charging you with grand larceny in the second degree and other related charges. How do you plead? Guilty or not guilty? The defendant, Alan Weisselberg, not guilty, Your Honor. The clerk, the Trump Corporation. The grand jury of the County of New York has filed an indictment charging you with scheme to defraud in the first degree and other related charges. How do you plead? Defense lawyer. The corporation pleads not guilty. The clerk. The Trump Payroll Corporation. The special grand jury has filed an indictment charging you with scheme to defraud in the first degree and other related charges. How do you plead? Guilty or not guilty? Defense lawyer, Your Honor, the company pleads not guilty. Thank you. The judge, very well. And a different prosecutor rises. Your Honor.
Wait.
In light of the many statements that have already been made about this case, I would like to clarify court briefly what this case is and is not about. As spelled out in the indictment, this was a 15-year-long tax fraud scheme involving off-the-books payments, which is a type of crime that is charged against companies and executives all the time. Contrary to today's assertion by the company's former CEO, former President Donald Trump, this is not a, quote, standard practice in the business community, nor was it the act of a rogue or isolated employee. Instead, it was orchestrated by the most senior executives who were financially benefiting themselves and the company by getting secret pay raises at the expense of state and federal taxpayers. The chief financial officer himself avoided taxes on $1.7 million of his own income, which hardly amounts to an incidental, quote, fringe benefit. And the former CEO, former President Donald Trump, himself signed many of the illegal compensation checks. To put it bluntly, this was a sweeping and audacious illegal payments scheme. As noted in the indictment, the chief financial officer himself, Alan Weisselberg, directed that company records be deleted to conceal his participation in this scheme with the knowledge of the company. Yet he remains to this day the most senior financial fiduciary in the company. Even now, there's been no attempt to impose discipline on the people involved, to report the crimes, repay the proceeds, or even to amend any of the false tax returns. Instead, when confronted by our investigation, the company at the highest levels decided not to accept responsibility and cooperate, which is what companies do if they want to be viewed as a good corporate citizen. Instead, the company forced us into litigation for a year and a half, including 2 trips to the United States Supreme Court. And even after they lost those claims at every turn, they failed to comply with subpoenas before this court and have refused even to allow us to speak to any of their employees except in the grand jury. To be clear, a company has a complete right to adopt this type of combative, uncooperative approach. But having done so, it doesn't have the right to turn around and demand the leniency and benefit that flows to a company that does cooperate. In short, contrary to the defense's assertions, there's no clearer example of a company that should be held to criminal account. And finally, to address what this case is not about. This case is not about politics. This investigation, which is ongoing, has been thorough, careful, and proper, and has been limited to subject matters within our New York jurisdiction. Politics has no role in the grand jury chamber, and I can assure Your Honor it played no role here. The charges were considered by an impartial grand jury, and we look forward to this court's review of the grand jury minutes, which will confirm that impartiality. Thank you, Your Honor. The judge then nods to the defense counsel for the Trump Organization and says, "Counsel?" Defense counsel rises. "Thank you, Your Honor." Your Honor, I appreciate the press release. I don't think at this point it warrants a response, bit by bit, claim by claim, so I'm not going to indulge in that at this time. Thank you, Your Honor. The judge, anything else? The defense lawyer for Alan Weisselberg rises. Your Honor, on behalf of Mr. Weisselberg, I don't have a microphone. Should I stand? The judge, we will hand you a microphone. Defense lawyer, thank you, Your Honor. I would just like to say, on behalf of Mr. Weisselberg, we object to the characterization of the facts that was just given to the extent that they relate to Mr. Weisselberg. Thank you. The judge, thank you. And that was the meat of it. There was a subsequent discussion right after that about discovery, which means the prosecutors have to give the defense lawyers the evidence that they've got in the case, which they're going to be basing their case on. At one point during the whole discovery discussion, when they're talking about handing over the evidence that they've got, they note pointedly that this is, as the defense lawyers, as the prosecutor said in his opening statement, this is an ongoing investigation. And so they ask for a protective order. What that means is that whatever they have to hand over to the defense lawyers in discovery, so the defense lawyers can get a good look at all the evidence and everybody's got a fair shot at defending the case on its merits. The protective order would mean that the defense lawyers can't show any of that material either to the public or to anybody who's not directly involved in the case. So the defense agrees to that protective order. The judge agrees to that protective order. There's a protective order. We will never see the public. We will never see the discovery in this case. The only other real thing that happened today at this arraignment was this sort of sad moment for Alan Weisselberg. Prosecutor
Hang on.
says to the judge, while these charges are eligible for bail, we believe there is a flight risk associated with this defendant, so surrender of the passport is necessary to reasonably assure his return to court. This defendant has been and apparently will remain the CFO of a company with international tentacles, and the evidence on this would demonstrate an ample record of travel by private jet, and defendant has significant means and connections to support himself outside the jurisdiction, including in places beyond our powers of extradition. The surrender of the passport is the least restrictive alternative condition that would reasonably assure defendant's return to court. It's our understanding that defendant Weisselberg consents to this condition and is prepared to surrender the passport to our investigators. The judge, do you in fact consent? Defense lawyer answers for him, yes, Your Honor. And then the judge just says bluntly, turn over the passport. Turn it over, Alan. The arraignment was today. In fact, there was no bail. Mr. Weisselberg did surrender his passport, but he was released on his own recognizance. They set a status conference, so the next time they'll be in court is mid-September. But as the arraignment was held today, the indictment was unsealed. And so in addition to the transcript of what happened in the room, we have the written account of the charges. There are 15 felony charges. It's 4 counts of criminal tax fraud, first-degree scheme to defraud. We'll get more clarity on that from somebody who knows these things in just a moment. There's a conspiracy count, 4 counts of falsifying business records, 4 counts of offering a false instrument for filing. That's a charge against Alan Weisselberg, the chief financial officer. There's another charge that Alan Weisselberg faces alone, which is grand larceny in the 2nd degree. Grand larceny, of course, is theft. They're accusing Weisselberg essentially of stealing, in effect, from the IRS by knowingly obtaining a tax refund that he was not supposed to get. But the news here, the genuinely interesting and I think potentially surprising news is, number one, this is a lot of charges. 15 felony charges is a more serious and extensive indictment than Trump Organization lawyers have been trying to spin to the public for the past week or so, for sure. This is a heftier indictment than they prepared people for. It's therefore a heftier indictment than I think most people were expecting. Number two, in statements today from the DA's office and from the New York Attorney General's office, remember this has essentially been a joint investigation by those 2 New York law enforcement entities. In statements from both of those entities and in that exchange in court that I described about why they need a protective order, because the case is still going on, it was made clear by prosecutors speaking in court, by statements from the defense from the DA and from the Attorney General, made more clear than at least I expected it to be today, that this indictment today isn't it. That in all likelihood more is coming, that the investigation proceeds. Of course, we believe that the special grand jury that we first learned about last month, the grand jury that's been sitting apparently 3 days a week to consider the evidence in this case, to consider bringing potential charges in this case, we believe that grand jury will continue to meet for the next 6 months. The New York Times, in fact, reports tonight about what's coming next here, actually in very blunt terms. This is what it says tonight in the New York Times' reporting on the case. Quote, the charges against the Trump Organization and Mr. Weisselberg ushered in a new phase of the district attorney's sweeping inquiry into the business practices of Mr. Trump and his company. While the indictment was narrowly focused on the tax scheme, the charges could lay the groundwork for the next steps in the wider investigation, which will focus on Mr. Trump. Again, that's being reported tonight in those terms by the New York Times. The next phase of the next steps in the wider investigation will focus on Mr. Trump. Quote, in the next phase of the broader investigation into Mr. Trump and his company, prosecutors are expected to continue scrutinizing whether the Trump Organization manipulated property values to obtain loans and tax benefits, among other potential financial crimes. So there had been some, I think, discussion and speculation that because bank fraud and insurance fraud, manipulating the valuation of various assets to defraud banks and insurance companies and tax authorities, that had been reported as a focus of these investigators, but it wasn't included in this indictment, there had been some discussion today that maybe that wasn't going anywhere and maybe that would never be charged. The way the Times is reporting this tonight, it sounds like that's what's next, with a focus on Mr. Trump himself. We'll see. But number one, the initial indictment is a lot of charges. 15 charges is a lot, 15 felonies. Number two, there's apparently more coming in the investigation that has already produced these 15 felony charges. Number three, there's been a lot of discussion today about an unindicted co-conspirator described in the indictment. As far as we can tell, that unindicted co-conspirator is not former President Trump himself. Just so you understand what I'm talking about here, here's one of the places that this unindicted co-conspirator phrase occurs in the indictment. It says, quote, operation of the conspiracy. From at least 2005 through the date of this indictment, the named defendants and others, including unindicted co-conspirator number one, agreed to and implemented a compensation scheme with the object of enabling defendant Allen Weisselberg to underreport his income to federal authorities and thereby evade taxes and falsely claim federal tax refunds to which he was not entitled. That unindicted co-conspirator does not appear to be former President Trump. I will explain exactly why I believe that's the case in just a moment. I will tell you, it would seem that there's a better chance that that unindicted co-conspirator is more likely to be somebody like the controller of the Trump Organization. The controller is an employee of the Trump Organization, a sort of lower level employee, actually, who reported to Allen Weisselberg. I mention the controller because he has been reported already to have appeared before the grand jury. We do not know for sure if the unindicted co-conspirator is him. We don't know for sure. There's a reason this person is not named in the indictment. We don't have any reason to believe, if it is the controller, that he has left his employment at the Trump Organization. As far as we can tell, he's still there. There's always the possibility when an unindicted co-conspirator is pointed to in an indictment that that person is cooperating. Prosecutors said that they have not been allowed to talk to any employees outside of the grand jury process. We know that controller spoke with prosecutors within the grand jury process. It remains to be seen. The reason I say the unindicted co-conspirator does not appear to be former President Trump is because he's described otherwise several times in the indictment. For example, he's described bluntly as a person who signed checks that were used to make allegedly illegal payments to pay private school tuition for some Weisselberg family members. He's described bluntly as the person, the president of the organization, who rented an apartment for Weisselberg on the west side of Manhattan. Both of those expenses are described as part of the alleged illegal tax evasion scheme at the heart of the indictment. There's no effort by prosecutors to hide Donald Trump's identity when it comes to his involvement in those acts. So just logically, it wouldn't make that much sense that they would describe him bluntly in those parts of the indictment and describe him as the unindicted co-conspirator elsewhere. But that brings me to the next point, which is that, as I mentioned earlier, the conduct that's described here is not subtle. Or particularly well hidden. At least it's no longer hidden from prosecutors. If you feel like we're wading too much into the legal niceties here, I'll bring it back to brass tacks. Did you see The Wire? Do you know that scene in The Wire where Idris Elba's character says, "Are you taking notes on a criminal conspiracy? What are you thinking?" Remember that scene? Classic scene, right? On The Wire. Here's how prosecutors say it worked at the Trump Organization. Pretty parallel. Quote, beginning in 2005 and as part of the scheme to defraud, Weisselberg signed rental checks drawn on the Trump Corporation's bank account. The checks were sent to the managing agent for the apartment building on Riverside Boulevard, where Weisselberg and his wife lived. Similarly, Weisselberg and others directed the Trump Corporation to issue checks to pay for Weisselberg's utility bills for the Riverside Boulevard apartment, including payments for electricity, phone services, internet, cable television service. During this period of time, the Trump Corporation also paid for Weisselberg's monthly garage expenses. At all relevant times, the payments of Weisselberg's rent, utilities, and garage expenses constituted employee compensation, constituted taxable income to Weisselberg. But these payments were not booked in the Trump Corporation's general ledger as employee compensation. That said, quote, for certain years, the Trump Organization maintained internal spreadsheets that tracked the amounts it paid for Weisselberg's rent, utility, and garage expenses. The indirect compensation to Weisselberg was not included on Weisselberg's W-2 forms or otherwise reported to tax authorities. So he's effectively getting paid actually like deducted from his salary what they paid him in rent, utilities, and his garage expenses and all this stuff. It was definitely part of his compensation. They didn't report it to tax authorities, and they didn't list it in the company's books, but they did apparently describe it to the penny in an internal spreadsheet that tracked every cent of it. Is you taking notes on a criminal bleeping conspiracy? What are you thinking? They kept internal written records of the stuff they were otherwise very carefully keeping off the books. Really? And prosecutors apparently now have that. Audacious and sweeping. That's how the prosecutor described it. And here's just one last point. This is what we're going to talk about tonight with somebody who knows these things. The scheme to have Trump's company pay for personal stuff for Trump Organization executives, as described in the indictment, as a scheme. So not only do those executives not have to pay for those things out of pocket, they would thereby dodge taxes on that, both from the company's side and the employee's side. Right? The indictment says that scheme was not limited to Alan Weisselberg and his family members who are compensated in that way. They describe other people who worked for the Trump Organization who benefited from this allegedly illegal tax evasion scheme. Similarly, the indictment says there were other Trump Organization executives who worked for the company, but they were regularly paid in ways that were designed to disguise their payment from tax authorities. They were regularly paid in ways to make it look like they weren't getting compensated as Trump Organization employees. They were getting paid as consultants or something. It has important tax consequences both for the company and for the executive getting paid that way. That's all spelled out in the indictment. It's spelled out in the indictment as a further part of the scheme to defraud. No other executives besides Alan Weisselberg is described as the beneficiaries of that fraud, but it is explicitly spelled out that he wasn't the only one who benefited from that kind of a scheme. I will also tell you that is exactly the kind of scheme described by New York Times reporters in September in their Pulitzer Prize-winning expose of Trump's financial adventures. They specifically described a scheme like that, a scheme like the one outlined in today's indictment, as it related to Ivanka Trump, the president's daughter. The Times described in detail financial records they discovered that showed Ivanka Trump being paid both as an employee of the Trump Organization and as a consultant to the Trump Organization in a way that seemed custom designed to try to evade taxes both for the company and for her. That is the executive scheme described at the end of the indictment. Prosecutors say that Weisselberg benefited from such a scheme and that other executives did too. They are not named in this indictment. But that is the Ivanka scheme described last fall in the New York Times. And, like I said, apparently there's more to come from this investigation. We've got much more on that in a second. Hold that thought. In order to obtain this remarkable indictment today against the company of former President Donald Trump and the company's longtime chief financial officer, New York prosecutors had to battle all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court twice to get access to Trump tax and financial documents that the president had fought to keep secret. Trump lost that fight ultimately, and in February, prosecutors did finally get access to millions of pages of Trump's taxes. That was February when they got access. By May, they'd impaneled a special grand jury to meet 3 days a week to consider the evidence and to consider potential charges. Today's indictment and the 15 felony charges that were unsealed today, that's the first public-facing product of that process. It may not be the last. As far as we know, that grand jury is still sitting and is expected to sit until the end of the year. Right now, there's only 2 known entities that have access to millions of pages of Trump financial and tax documents to review. One of them is that prosecutor's office, which today unveiled these 15 felony charges against the former president's business. The other entity is a small reporting team at the New York Times, which obtained more than a decade's worth of Trump tax documents and won a Pulitzer Prize for their writing about it. Since 2019, they've been chronicling how the former president and his family and his business have spent years, among other things, aggressively avoiding paying taxes. Joining us now is a member of that reporting team, Suzanne Craig, investigative reporter for the New York Times. Suzanne, I've been really looking forward to talking to you about this. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Reading the indictment today and knowing what prosecutors said today in court, do you feel like you saw some of this coming? with what you were able to report on about Trump's tax practices and business practices?
Yeah, we've been looking now at his finances for 5 or 6 years, and we got a hold of his taxes and published a story that came out in 2020 around that. And there are a number of discrete issues that we saw that we think still need to be surfaced. I'm not surprised about today. It seemed actually interesting about today that it was built more around Alan Weiselberg's taxes than it was around Donald Trump's taxes. So I think they're still working their way through. The investigation's continuing. And, we saw when we were going through our work, 4 or 5 or 6 discrete issues that are I'm sure, and I've heard are of interest to the Manhattan DA and their investigators.
One of the things that caught my eye is your reporting from last fall about a scheme that you uncovered basically by comparing different financial documents, which showed that the president's daughter, Ivanka Trump, was paid as a consultant in a way that seemed designed to avoid paying taxes on some of her income, a way that would have been advantageous both to her and also to the Trump organization. I wondered if you saw any reflections of that scheme that you described, particularly in those later parts of the indictment where they described ongoing schemes involving multiple executives around the way their compensation was described to authorities.
It sure did feel of a piece to me what we saw when we were doing our work with the payments, some of which went to Ivanka Trump. You're seeing money that's coming out and being allocated. Alan Weiselberg had some of that through a certain payment. And with Ivanka Trump, what we saw, and others are involved as well, there was $26 million that we found in consulting fees that were being paid from entities that Donald Trump controls outward. We couldn't see who they were going to, but we saw them going out, and it was like, wow. When we saw it, we were like, where were these going? And then what we found as we went along was we were comparing the taxes to other documents. We had public documents and other documents, and we saw some of it actually went to a company that is controlled by Ivanka Trump is an officer of, and then paid out to Ivanka Trump. And why that was a red flag is because she's an officer of the Trump organization and she's paid more than $2 million, and she's also getting consulting fees. And that's sort of something that right away should be, the IRS would be looking at it and saying, hey, they're only supposed to, these sort of payments should be ordinary and necessary. And you have to question why somebody who's making $2 million at the Trump organization is also getting consulting fees. So you're sort of like, what's going on? And what we, in our reporting, suspected and we reported about was that this was an attempt by Donald Trump to reduce his taxable income and to transfer money to his kids. That may also have had the effect of reducing or of him voiding the gift tax to them. So it's a way to transfer wealth potentially from one generation to another. We didn't have access to other people's tax information to see if potentially Eric Trump was getting some of these payments, if Donald Trump Jr. was getting some of these payments, but they are also a member and are part of that company that was getting the money that went to Ivanka.
And briefly to that point, the kinds of documents that would show that, if that's the case, is it your understanding, from what we can see publicly about this court case, that those are the kinds of documents that the prosecutors have?
I can't imagine that they don't have them by now, and the New York Attorney General had gone after the information from the company that received those payments, called TTT, for Trump. So they've got those records, and I don't know how much further they've gotten, if they've gotten tax returns of other members of the Trump family. But that's a real just follow the money case. We were like, wow, when we saw it, we started to work through it. We dead-ended in the tax returns. But then, because Ivanka Trump had gone to the administration, she had financial filings, and we were able to match them up. I have worked with two great reporters on it, Russ Buettner and Mike McIntyre, and it was a great effort. It took us a long time to put all that together, but it's there, and it's one of the things that the Manhattan DA is looking at.
Suzanne Craig, investigative reporter for the New York Times. Suzanne, thank you for your time tonight, and as always for your clarity on this complex stuff. I really appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
All right, I want to bring into the conversation now Dan Alonso. Mr. Alonso previously served as the #2 official in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office under Cy Vance, the prosecutor whose office brought these charges today. It was in that role that he wrote the memo which governs the office's current policy about how and when to file criminal charges against corporations. Mr. Alonso, it's really nice of you to make time. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Rachel.
I am not a lawyer, and I am a non-seasoned observer of New York state criminal prosecutions. And there were a number of things that spoke to me and surprised me about this indictment today, in part that it was 15 charges, and that the prosecutors use pretty bold language in describing what they said was an ongoing, sort of unrepentant scheme at the company to do this in a systematic way with significant financial and legal consequences. That just stood out to me as it just seeming heftier than I expected it to be. I just wanted to get your reaction, and maybe you could set me straight if my expectations were put in the wrong place.
Yeah, no, it's totally understandable, right? It is 15 counts. I will say that I would focus more on the hefty language and the facts that are alleged, which seem incredibly powerful, than I would on the fact that there are 15 counts.
Shit.
For reasons I won't bore you with, New York kind of requires you to separate out counts and not lump multiple things into one count as you can do in federal court. So it might have been a more streamlined indictment in federal court. But either way, it does tell a story. And it's that story that we should be focused on. And I think that story is a very powerful one, more powerful than we thought yesterday, based on what we had heard from the lawyers for Trump and the organization.
Well, let me raise a point that was raised by the defense lawyers, by the Trump Organization defense lawyers, and that was actually just referenced by Suzanne Craig from the New York Times. In talking about the prospect of this executive compensation scheme that prosecutors described, which may have essentially been an ongoing scheme to pay executives in a way that was knowingly designed to evade taxes both from the company's perspective and from the executive's perspective. Suzanne described the reporting that the New York Times did as something that should have popped for the IRS. Looking at the way that the executives were paid, and then to see them get paid in this other way that didn't make much sense given what their jobs were, including the president's daughter, Ivanka Trump. That resonated for me with alongside what we heard today from Trump defense lawyers saying, listen, if these were serious tax evasion, if this was serious tax evasion, the IRS would have come after us for this. The IRS would have been pursuing this, not some DA in Manhattan. What do you make of that charge?
Frankly, it seems a little silly, but I will say that in terms of what Suzanne said, I get it, that why wouldn't the IRS be doing it? I will tell you that the IRS was an opaque entity even when I was a federal prosecutor. So they kind of pick up what they pick up. It takes them a long time, and tax cases in federal court tend to be brought many years after the acts in question. So I wouldn't put any credence into not knowing whether or not the IRS is investigating. They may well be in the normal course of things, and we may hear about that. But in terms of this criminal investigation, that's not a defense. You can't say, oh, geez, we shouldn't be convicted of this because some other entity really should have prosecuted us. Well, geez, if that's the case, then the Manhattan DA's office wouldn't do any white-collar cases. They have a long tradition of doing great cases that could be brought in federal court. So this is just one of them. So that's just kind of a silly defense.
Last brief question for you, Dan. Scheme to defraud in the first degree is a jumble of words that I've never necessarily heard before, but obviously that's technically the most serious charge the Trump Organization is facing. What should we understand, in layman's terms, what should we understand scheme to defraud to mean in terms of an alleged crime?
From a prosecutor's perspective, it's a great statute with relatively weak penalties. So it is patterned after federal mail fraud, which is basically to punish the devising of a scheme or artifice to defraud, which basically means trying to get money from people or companies or property by lying to them, by false and fraudulent pretenses, etc. And so it punishes a scheme rather than just a one-time transaction, which is why this case can allege a 15-year scheme in one count. Now, it requires more than one victim, and I think it was brilliant of these prosecutors to include the IRS as a victim, because it takes what might have been a $100,000 case and turned it into a $900,000 case, which is quite a bit more difficult. So hopefully that answered your question about scheme to defraud.
It absolutely does. Daniel R. Alonso, former New York prosecutor, served as Chief Assistant District Attorney under Cy Vance. Dan, I know it's been a long day with a lot to absorb. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Rachel.
All right, coming up next, I said that as soon as I saw this indictment, I knew that I wanted to talk to Dan Alonso. I knew that I wanted to talk to Suzanne Craig about this. The other person I most wanted to talk to about this is Mary Trump, Donald Trump's niece. And she agreed to do an interview with us here next.
Hang on.
Early on in Trump presidency, New York Times reporters obtained more than 100,000 pages of documents detailing the finances of Trump's business
I'm backing it up.
conspiracy.
Just making sure I didn't miss
What are you
anything.
thinking? They kept internal written record.
Okay,
reporting.
okay. So I didn't really miss anything.
They've got.
Thank you so much for being here.
They are also on all that together.
Repentant
Or the
Okay.
Alonzo, for some instances. Thanks for being here.
Okay.
Thank you, Rachel.
All right, coming up next, I said that as soon as I saw this indictment, I knew that I wanted to talk to Dan Alonso. I knew that I wanted to talk to Suzanne Craig about this. The other
Okay.
person I most wanted to talk to about this is Mary Trump, Donald Trump's niece. And she agreed to do an interview with us here next. Early on in Trump presidency, New York Times reporters obtained more than 100,000 pages of documents detailing the finances of Trump's business and the Trump family. And ultimately, the Times turned those documents into multiple several thousand-word investigations showing how for years Trump and his family participated in tax schemes and in some instances what appeared to be outright fraud, schemes that saved them
So
potentially hundreds of millions of dollars on tax bills over the years. It was kind of a mystery when the first part of that story broke, how the reporters from the
Sorry.
Times could have possibly gotten their hands
I'm
on so
trying
many of those
my best.
personal financial documents. It was a mystery until this book came out. It was written by Donald Trump's niece, Mary Trump. And in the book, Mary Trump revealed that she was the one who'd had access to those documents. And she had turned them over to reporters at the New York Times. And those documents were not just the source of remarkable award-winning journalism. They also became the basis of a lawsuit that Mary Trump launched against her uncle, Donald Trump, in which she alleges he cheated her out of tens of millions of dollars in Trump family assets that were otherwise rightfully hers. That lawsuit, of course, is now just one item in a growing list of legal woes for the former president and his business, including these new charges brought in New York State Court today. Joining us now, I'm pleased to say, is Donald Trump's niece, Mary Trump. She's the author of Too Much and Never Enough, How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man. She also has a new book coming out on August 17th, which is called The Reckoning, Our Nation's Trauma and Finding a Way to Heal. Mary Trump, it is great to see you. It's been too long. Thank you so much for coming back.
Oh, it's great to be here, Rachel. I'm so pleased that you asked me.
Let me ask your unique perspective on how you think your uncle and the people around him
Distant Voyage
will
Web event
react
has
to
begun.
This is something that for all the efforts to sort of get accountability for various things that he's done, criminal charges brought against his business is something new that he's never faced before, anything like it he's never faced before. How do you think he'll react?
I'm sure he's quite angry. I wouldn't want to be around him right now. But unlike other people close to him who are probably extremely nervous, I don't believe Donald will be. Because he's been getting away with this sort of thing for so long that he must feel immune, because he always has been. These are the kinds of charges that could have been leveled against him and other people in my family decades ago. He's also, I'm sure, quite confident in Alan Weisselberg's loyalty to him. He doesn't believe for a second that Alan Weisselberg will flip on him. So unless prosecutors can find somebody else who will flip, or unless they can find something else in the many millions of pages of documents they have, Donald is going to be completely confident in Alan's loyalty, for sure.
One of the things that has struck me over the course of the day is this sort of very bluntly worded reporting from the New York Times, which emerged after today's arraignment, that the next phase of the investigation, not only is there a next phase, that there will be further work from the grand jury and potentially further indictments, but that it focuses specifically on your uncle, and that it is going to be looking at some of the things that Michael Cohen testified about to Congress, adjusting the valuation of various assets to allegedly defraud banks, insurance companies, and tax authorities. The prospect that charges wouldn't just be targeting Alan Weisselberg wouldn't just be targeting the company, but would target him personally, must seem like a different, sort of a different level, though.
Yeah, sure. And it shouldn't surprise anybody except perhaps Donald, because
Sorry?
there
My bad,
are
I'm-
long-standing patterns here,
Just wanted
and
to see.
my lawsuit will show just how consistent those patterns are and have been since the 80s. And the other thing that people need to understand is that when my grandfather was alive, Donald was involved in everything that went on. And after my grandfather started suffering from Alzheimer's, nothing happened in the family or in my grandfather's business or in Donald's business without his explicit say-so. He was running the show. He is always the person who knows what's going on, and nobody does anything independently from him, and that includes his siblings as well. So again, he should be quite nervous, but I think the fact that he's gotten away with so much for so long, including over the past 4 years when he was in the Oval Office, will continue to give him a false sense of confidence.
Is that interrupted at all by the prospect that the other executives of the Trump organization,
Sorry,
who are his children,
that event I was
may
wanting
be
to
in
try
the
to
line of
participate
fire
in.
here? I mean, one of the, I think, the important threads to pull from that Pulitzer Prize-winning reporting at the New York Times, based on
So
Trump,
there's no time limit on
financial
these.
records, is that, among others, it appears that Ivanka Trump benefited from the type of scheme that's described at the end of the indictment today, that Trump executives were compensated in ways that were deliberately designed to help them evade taxes and to help the business evade taxes on their behalf. Alan Weisselberg is being charged for benefiting from that scheme. The indictment says other executives also benefited from that scheme, and now we've got solid reporting that the investigation continues. That raises the prospect that further charges could be brought against his children.
Yeah, it does. And I think they should be quite anxious right now. Donald, on the other hand, will expect the same kind and level of loyalty from them as he expects from Alan. You know, as far as Donald's concerned, they have what they have because of him. And they should be willing to take whatever hit they're going to take. He doesn't understand, I guess, how these things work. Prosecutors won't stop at my cousins. They will be going for the bigger fish, which would be Donald, who's been running this organization for over 30 years now. So I think he would be surprised to learn that I don't believe my cousins would exercise that kind of loyalty towards him, because his relationship with them and their relationship.
I still need another 130. Okay, let's see if I'm a high enough rank to do this before we, Okay, good. Then...
Test run. Okay. Yeesh. Speaking of power, something I need to show the Knights of Favonius. But yeah, sorry that y'all had to listen to me watch Rachel Maddow while I was playing. I'm trying to... Well, I was trying to do more than one thing at once.
cutie. I don't think he's a bad guy. Yeah. Exact same shade of green. What a coincidence. Alright, thank you for the follow, ISE Gaming. Appreciate it. Alright. Back to what I was doing. Right. Let's go after him. The exact path he took. That's Storm Terror's real name. I'm sorry, and you are? Not sure how this happened. That is interesting. I also feel sorry for Dvalin. This weirdo, as you put it, we need to keep an eye on him. You know, his voice seems familiar. Someone told me about Dvalin's past. think I've heard that name before in Mondstadt. That was me. Oops. Okay. Okay, I am at some point going to need to turn on something to play in the background because my brain is currently shot. I will have to also go grab my dog from upstairs. She's been waiting patiently, and I'm going to have to send her out for one last bathroom break before the things start getting really, really exciting over here. Just what is that in your eyes? That tracks. I'm the honorary knight of Favonius Geronis. Yes, actually, the Knights of Favonius would like to borrow the Holy Lyre. The Grand Master didn't mention it. Oh, come on. I was gonna pick something. Thank you for the follow on Facebook. Kokonotsu Logis Kamari. Thank you. And it looks like Sir Toei, my eyes are kind of blurring it, said Pog. Okay. Alright. Sorry, wait, did you just say you're Barbados? You really are a god, then we simply can't abandon you. Oh, thank you. And if you're not a god, then I'll help Dvalin anyway. I don't want to see another separation. To the cathedral at night. crap. Yeah, I didn't get far enough away. Crap. Specific landing zone, I'm guessing? Crap. Okay. So specific landing zone it is. Huh. Huh. That's How about answering my question first? I've only heard him play once. And efficient, right? From beginning to end. Yeah. Definitely. Fair enough. Story I wanted to tell starts at Sky Dragon Meeting's call. Brutal battle with Wicked Dragon. Bones blood and fell into slumber only to explode. So the same. I'm fine, thanks. Oh, we definitely are. Wait, what? Pretend not to have heard anything. So they went to kill the Valen. Let's go. Oh, thank you for the follow. Appreciate it.